We have administrators who aren't listening to us, and we're trying to make the student voice heard right now through this process. Because it is my belief that sometimes the decision makers need to look like us in order for the right decisions to be made, and that's what I think we are trying to accomplish through a resolution like this.
Imagine if I had just said, the people need to look like me for me to travel.
They already do. They do.
That was a scene from last semester's student government debate on campus diversity. I'm Helen Flourish.
And I'm Aaron Hendel. As you can see, conversations around diversity can get pretty heated.
Today we explore what it means to be part of a diverse campus and community. I'm Cindy Robinson. Welcome to The Current.
USC's student body is becoming increasingly more diverse. The university announced the current freshman class is among the most diverse in USC's 135-year history. This chart shows student demographics from fall 2015. The most underrepresented group of students is African Americans. The student body is about 34% white, 24% international, 18% Asian, 13% Hispanic, 7% other, and 5% black. But this diversity has also brought challenges. Last semester, USG Senate passed a campus climate resolution in November to help direct funding and resources to better serve everyone on campus. Last night's Campus Climate sponsored a forum for students to talk about their experiences with racial profiling at USC. It included representatives from the Department of Public Safety and faculty members and allowed students to share their personal stories.
Students, faculty, and DPS gathered to discuss the hot topics of Greek life and racial profiling on USC's campus. Students openly discussed their views on Greek life and its influence at USC.
The gangs that we see on this campus, you don't see Blood, you don't see Crips, you see Phi Psi, Lambda, Gamma, etc. Those are the gangs at USC.
Other students see issues with diversity in the administration.
We are diverse in some ways and we're not diverse in other ways, but regardless, there's definitely not enough representation in the structures that have political power, like in the Greek system and in the administration.
Among the issues brought up at the forum, racial profiling hit a personal note with members in the audience.
We know that a number of students feel that they are often racially profiled when they arrive on campus. They're the ones singled out when they try to arrive after 9 p.m.
I had the chance to sit down with Kaylin Leaks, a USC senior who was a victim of racial profiling here on USC's campus. Leaks was in his own apartment when DPS came in for a wellness check.
But it was like not just one or two, but four fully uniformed DPS officers. And like within like 15 seconds of opening the door to my apartment, I was immediately put in handcuffs without any sort of like reasoning.
Kaylin says the actions of DPS officers were uncalled for.
Like I wasn't being violent towards them, I wasn't like raising my voice at them at all. I was being fully cooperative. In general, I do not feel comfortable like either like talking to DPS about my own mental health or like if there's many for mentally ill people I know on campus, I wouldn't feel comfortable sending DPS to them at all.
DPS Chief John Thomas responded to Leaks at the forum.
That was a breakdown in our policy, and I apologize to you for that.
But students say an apology is not enough.
Clearly, the training they have in place isn't working because there's so many instances that we hear from RAs and from students of students not getting proper treatment.
A series of forums hosted by DPS and the Dorns Life Office of Diversity and Strategic Initiatives will continue throughout the semester to encourage discussion and action.
Wednesday's panel was part of a continuing effort to encourage discussion about important issues and improve campus climate at USC.
And here with us to further discuss diversity on campus is Professor Jody Armour. He teaches at the Gould School of Law here at USC with a focus on racial bias in the justice system. He's appeared on many TV and radio programs to speak about race relations. Professor Armour, so glad that you could join us today.
Good to be with you.
All right, so Professor Armour, there have been a number of incidents where students of color say that they have been racially profiled here on campus. Could you maybe comment on their claims?
Yeah, well, to be racially profiled is to be treated differently because of your race. So what you're saying is a similarly situated white person would not have been stopped by the police, would not have been asked questions. I was, in part because he made an inference about me based on my racial identity. And the question is, are people always being racist when they discriminate against others on the basis of their racial identity. What we're finding in some of the psychological studies is sometimes well-meaning people who are racially liberal and don't intend to discriminate, unconsciously discriminate against out-group members like blacks. Not meaning to, they treat them differently because of their unconscious psychological processes. So that's the problem. You can have racism without racists, if you will. You can have discrimination without conscious wrongdoing by the people doing the discriminating. So that's one of the things that we're learning from modern psychology, and it's one of the things that makes the profiling debate so difficult and so full of dilemmas and trouble.
You work with police officers and guards and things like that to kind of talk to them about their own biases.
Yeah.
How do you approach those individuals without offending them?
Yeah, the key thing is not to go into these conversations just talking about racism or racist. Nobody wants to view themselves as a racist. Even if you talk about unconscious racism, no one wants to view themselves as an unconscious racist. Just that label is so distasteful that a lot of people try to distinguish and distance themselves from it. I find it's much better to talk about mental habits. Look, we're all creatures of habit. And all a stereotype is a well-learned set of associations, like a habit, that can run automatically without your conscious awareness, also like a habit. So an example of a stereotype would be a 3-year-old white girl who, in Phyllis Katz's piece in the New York Times, said to her mother upon seeing a black infant, "Look, Mom, a baby made." Now that 3-year-old little girl isn't a bigot, she's not a racist. All she's doing is reporting an association that's been forged in her memory between women from a certain social identity and a social role she commonly sees them in. She may turn 18, reach the age of judgment, and come to renounce that as an appropriate way to think about black women. Her personal standards may be egalitarian, but that doesn't mean that well-learned set of associations has disappeared. So now she has the possibility of unconscious bias established in her memory that can spring out and affect her perceptions and judgments without her conscious awareness.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the problem, is that even those of us who don't think that the things that we're doing are racist or, or done with bias, we're doing them unconsciously. And so in terms of campus, bringing this conversation back to campus climate,
yes.
What do you think that what's the role of the administration in tackling this type of unconscious prejudice? What are the types of things that we could do?
Yeah, I think our administration, like many administrations around the country, are trying to take diversity, inclusion, campus climate issues seriously. Certainly ours, I think, has kind of gotten ahead of the curve some and had some discussions about diversity and was forming committees even before some of the big events happening around Tim Wolf and the University of Missouri, where the president stepped down in response to student activism and athlete activism, et cetera. I think that our provost has actually been ahead of that curve and has been taking some proactive steps at addressing this. So what you need are things like, let's have lots of discussions about the nature of unconscious bias. Let's start to talk about ways that we can combat unconscious bias, because one of the things we've learned is that to combat an unconscious habit, a mental habit, requires intention, attention, and effort. Think about any bad habit that you're trying to break. If you're trying to break a bad habit, whenever you're in the presence of environmental cues that trigger the habitual responses, you have to bring to mind your conscious commitments for how you want to continue, go forward. It takes intention, attention, and effort. In other words, it takes color consciousness, not color blindness. You can't, for a long time, people have said, oh, if you're just color blind, you can get over discrimination. It's kind of that old Stephen Colbert joke when he used to say, I may have black friends, but I don't know because I don't see race. Some people tell me I have black friends. Of course, we all see race. We see, gender. It's in our mental processes to recognize that, and then the unconscious processes can get started. So it takes attention, intention, and effort to combat these unconscious biases. And for example, give me one quick example. The Trayvon Martin case of how you might do this. And Trayvon Martin, remember, 17-year-old black male, went to get some iced tea, Arizona iced tea and Skittles, and George Zimmerman shot him and argued stand your ground, who was a non-black shooter, right? Try some racial role reversal and see if you have the same response. Say, make Trayvon Martin a 17-year-old Brad Pitt, and make George Zimmerman, I don't know, Wesley Snipes, some familiar black person that you know, a lot of people are going to have a different reaction to those facts. I'm not so sure there's an acquittal in that case under those facts because race matters. So, there are exercises like that in which we can try to consciously confront our own stereotypes, our own unconscious habits, our own biases, and try to resist succumbing to them. But it takes work. It takes a commitment as a community. We have to start looking at discrimination not as just something bad people do, but that we all do because it's part of our cultural belief system. We're swimming in stereotypes all the time. So it's a collective problem that we need a collective solution to.
Your work in law, like I was mentioned earlier, focuses on the way that biases shape policy. And so are there any particular policy changes you feel like need to be made?
Okay, let's start with our smaller society, the one we have more control over, our own campus. We can start with honest conversations. What the Black Lives Matter movement has effectively done over the last 18 to 24 months and raised consciousness around the nation, around racial justice issues, is follow two practices. Number one, disruption. We're going to shut it down, cut through complacency, about these kinds of issues, number one. So, and then number two, uncomfortable conversations. Let's have, so we don't need necessarily a lot of disruption. What we do need is a willingness to embrace. Right now, I don't think on campus, right, because we're having a conversation now. We're moving in the right direction. Now it's a matter of, are we ready to have the uncomfortable conversations? And I think that's, can we have forums? Can we have plenty of opportunities in the classroom and out to have difficult conversations that can help us all grow? Because USC students are going to go out into the world and be leaders. And to be a leader in an increasingly multicultural world, you have to understand differences among people and how to lead with a lot of diversity in the world around you. So this is a great training ground for stepping outside these walls and learning how to deal with inclusion and diversity in the campus setting. You may have heard about Texas at Texas A&M. There were some students who, high school students who were visiting, and they were the subject to racial slurs from some of the university students on campus. So that's an instance of overt racism, and the administration responded by sending these high school students apology letters, handwritten cards for them. Said, we're sorry for what happened. Do you think that response is adequate? Well, that's a good start, recognizing the harm, the injury, the kind of, that words like that can wound the psyches of these young people. That's a good start. I think a lot of people might want a more punitive response toward the people who made the statements. And I don't think that always the most punitive response is always the best. Sometimes we have to, especially in a college setting, try for an educative approach. We've got to try to take these as teachable moments and try to educate toward tolerance and towards more unity around them. So I'm not necessarily saying that there shouldn't be some reaction by the administration, some process, but I wouldn't necessarily look for the most punitive response possible. I'd look for an opportunity to say, what does it mean to be a member of this community? How can we treat one another more as the kind of group that we want to be and take a more positive rather than punitive approach? Absolutely, and thank you so much. We're out of time, unfortunately. Good talking to you. But thank you for being here. My pleasure. Awesome.
High school and college can be some of the toughest years of a young adult's life, but LGBT students face some different obstacles than the average student. We got an inside look at some of the problems LGBT students face and some possible solutions.
Hi, my name is Linda Rodriguez. I'm a senior. I'm a high school student.
Hi, my name is Nate Gualtieri, and I am a junior, and I'm a student at USC. I am transgender. I'm a transgender man.
Personally, I identify as bisexual, and in high school, that's really you get judged a lot.
There's a lot of roadblocks to just transitioning and becoming who you want to be.
I've had people tell me oh, you're not bisexual because you've only dated guys.
People don't believe you. I feel like I should be able to change my name within the university without having to change it legally first, so that I don't have to out myself to my teachers every time, before the legal name change goes through.
No one's in the position to decide who you are and who you're not. No one is in the position to label you, to tell you what you can and what you can't be.
You have to be your own educator. Sometimes I lose an ID card and then they're like, no, this is what it says on the form. You can't do that.
I make that choice for myself. I am who I am.
I definitely understand your situation. I have many friends that definitely get that. It's a whole disbelief, I guess. People can't really, that's not up to other people to decide who you are.
One advocacy group recently ranked USC among the top 10 colleges for LGBT communities. Members of the LGBT Resource Center on campus have been active in the discussion with administration about improving the campus climate at USC.
USC student government plays a key role in continuing the diversity conversation on campus. USG President-elect Edwin Saucedo and Vice President-elect Austin Dunn join us now to talk about their plans to improve the atmosphere of inclusion on campus. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
You gave the administration a B+ to A- grade on their handling of diversity issues. Why do you think that is, and what do you guys plan on doing to help them improve that?
Yeah, I think that we can always continue working on the things that have already been started this year. I think that the campus climate resolution was a great step to addressing diversity issues this past year, but we want to continue working with our assembly directors and our diversity affairs and make sure that we are following through with everything that was started and continue that relationship with the administration to make sure they understand the different needs of our student body.
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, what we meant by that was that great progress has been made, but there's still a lot more work to be done.
And you mentioned that campus climate resolution. It was a bit controversial. It was passed last semester. What effect do you think it's had already, and what can we expect to see from it in the future?
I think first and foremost, administration is actually addressing some of the issues that are happening on campus. I think you see a lot more initiatives happening, and you see the different forums that are taking place coming from the provost office and more conversations happening with administration. So that's something that wasn't taking place before. So I think that's a great step to continue that going into next year.
Yeah, I think the discussions have been started, so I think from our end, our administration is really going to look to make sure that we're pushing all the initiatives and ideas forward now, actually putting them into action.
And in the last presidential debate, you guys called yourselves the most diverse ticket. What did you mean by that?
There's a lot of different things that we meant by that. I think first and foremost, within the organization experience that we have, I come from the programming background, Austin comes from the advocacy background. I think in terms of the team that we created for a core team, it was all people who come from different parts of campus, different involvements on campus, so that was something that really emphasized diversity. I think our personal backgrounds are also very diverse.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I'm Greek, Edwin's not Greek, so we do represent two different constituencies in that regard. But I think going beyond that, I think that we just come from, like you said, different backgrounds, and I think that it's really just the common goal that unites us.
And going back to the debate for a second, you introduced yourselves at that debate by specifying your pronouns are he, him, his. Why did you feel that needed to be explicitly stated, and what did you mean by those words?
Yeah, using pronouns as a whole is just a general idea that we want to continue promoting. Not everyone feels comfortable with their assumed pronouns, so we want to make sure that people feel comfortable and know that they should be able to say their pronouns, and if they feel like they shouldn't be referred to she, her, hers, or he, him, his, that they want to be referred to they, their, theirs, or anything else, they should feel comfortable to have that space in the room and to have someone question what their the preferred pronouns are.
Yeah, it's simply the matter of taking small steps like that, stating your pronouns in your introduction, that creates a more inclusive space. And I think that's something that we're definitely looking to foster, not only within the organization, but outside of it. And I think that that kind of starts within our own organization.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining me here today. Come back again soon and check in.
Great, thank you for having me.
Diversity can mean many things. Annenberg Media reporter Randall Newsom asked students on campus what diversity means to them and why it's such an important topic to talk about.
To me, diversity means like being exposed to people of like different cultures and traditions.
The dictionary definition, just having multiple cultures or races.
I think it's when like a bunch of different people are together and no one notices that they're different.
Different languages, different ethnicities.
Doesn't necessarily only have to deal with race, but also culture and religion and the differences that people see in, different people.
Food, like I guess like it's like a lot of different things that come together to kind of form diversity for me.
Diversity to me, I think, means black, white, Asian, transgender, homosexual, bisexual, whatever, Native American, everyone being together in the same place.
Being accepting of the differences. Yeah, we're going to have prejudices. I mean, I think that's human nature. We're going to prejudge people based on similar experiences that other people that person reminds us of. I think that's just natural. But being diverse is like knowing that, okay, I'm going to meet people that are different. I'm going to meet people that are somewhat similar. But it's good to have a collection of all that so that allows me to become a more layered individual.
Let us know what diversity means to you. You can reach us on Twitter, Facebook, or the Annenberg Media website.
Gay men are often stereotyped and discriminated against, especially in sports. Annenberg media reporter Daniel Tran went to Eagle Rock to see how one sports club is redefining masculinity.
This is Philip Komaroth. He is a project coordinator for a digital marketing agency in Los Angeles, and generally a nice guy. By day, he works diligently for his clients, socializes with coworkers, and sometimes enjoys free cake and ice cream. By night, however, things get a little rough. Komaroth is a forward on the Rebellion, a local rugby team in North Los Angeles that welcomes players of all skill levels.
We have people ranging from all types of experience to, they just joined last month, to people who have been playing, 12, 13 years when they're in college and sometimes in high school.
Varying experience isn't the only thing that the Rebellion is open to.
We promote being, equal opportunity, all-inclusive. So it's regardless of age, gender, skill level, sexual orientation, and body type, because in rugby, everybody has a place in it.
This is the only rugby team in Los Angeles that explicitly welcomes everyone, regardless of sexual preferences. Komaroth, who is gay himself, is grateful.
It's awesome. It's a place to be comfortable and to be who you are and yet still play a masculine sport.
Gabriel Galuccio founded the Rebellion in 2001. His decision came after participating in the Gay Games in 1998.
The motivation was to inspire people to not have to hide their sexuality.
The Rebellion started with 3 members. Now they have about 50 players on the roster.
So coming back here and see the amount of guys that are on the team, I'm so happy. I mean, I'm sometimes, when I first came back, I was almost in tears because I didn't realize there was this many.
The Rebellion has yet to win the elusive Bingham Cup, the biannual international tournament between gay clubs around the world. They hope to change that in 2016 when the tournament begins in Nashville, Tennessee. Reporting from the Yosemite Recreation Center in Los Angeles, I'm Daniel Tran.
The School of Dramatic Arts at USC is also joining the conversation about diversity. MFA students are performing Twilight, Los Angeles 1992, a play based on a series of interviews in the aftermath of the Rodney King riots. Take a look.
We go get our motherfucking justice. We tear this shit up. We bring it to them.
I just broke down crying because I was sure they were going to be guilty. The whole world saw that tape, which I thought was more than the evidence they needed, but I guess the truth doesn't matter,
I knew, obviously, that some people were going to be upset by it, but I did not expect nearly what happened.
LA was like a war zone.
War zone. War zone. Chaos.
LA was a shit show.
I understand people was angry.
As long as this country been taken from me and mine, you thought I wasn't gonna jump at the first opportunity to repay them motherfuckers?
Christian Henley grew up in South Central LA and plays 2 characters in the performance. Thanks for being here, Christian.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about the characters you portray and how you prepared for those roles.
My first character's name is Keith Watson, followed by Paul Parker. And my first character, he comes from right around the area of Florence and Normandy. He grew up there. He was ex-military, involved in gang life. So for this kind of character, and his portrayal and his activism in the Rodney King riots, in the Reginald Denny beating, he was one of the 4 assailants of Reginald Denny. Well, there were 6, but they called it the LA 4, and he was one of the big 4, as you would call it. And looking at different interviews from him, he was talking about how it was just the excitement and it was just the energy of what was happening. It's not his character. This is the same kind of guy. Like I said, he was a member of a gang, but he's also ex-military. And he was also the neighborhood watch, the leader, as his father was. So you look at a guy like that, and you would want to make the judgment, okay, what's his character? You can't really make a call. But hearing his words and the way he speaks and his actions, you can see that he was desperate to belong to something greater than himself. His entire life, he was looking to belong to something greater than himself. And so you find yourself in a situation, he even says, one of his lines in the play is, I'm up there with Martin and Malcolm. I'm talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And this was his act of he just put his foot on Reginald Denny's neck, which is not condonable in any circumstance. but this is a guy who wants to do something for his people. And so that, I felt very fortunate in a sense to play him, because you can see that we're all trying to do something, we're all trying to speak, and maybe because of resource and accessibility to different things, we have to speak in different ways. And speaking in different ways, my second character, Paul Parker, is a black activist, educated, Ivy League educated, and he is actually the counsel defense for the LA4. And he walked into a room in an African dashiki, and he can speak very eloquently, and he can go from the side of Keith Watson and then turn on the Ivy League educated Barack Obama kind of persona.
Okay, so what do you remember, if anything, from your childhood about that period?
Well, I was 2 years old.
Okay.
So I don't consciously remember anything. However, it does live in me, and I am, I think, not directly affected by it, but indirectly, given that my parents were both in the midst of it, my family was in the midst of it, and living right here in the area. Speaking with my mother and father about the times, they were completely terrified. My mother more so than my father. My father's a character, and no, he didn't participate in any riots or any looting, rather. But they were more so afraid of something that's not often talked about, is the black-on-black crime, or the turmoil between the same race. It's often blacks against the Koreans, or the Mexicans and the Koreans, but or whites. But there was a lot of infighting, and it was just a very scary time.
Yeah. So how have things changed, if at all, in South Central since the riots?
Well, I would say things have changed a lot in certain aspects, and some things have not changed at all. And it's a much larger conversation than South Central Los Angeles, because a lot of the things that govern and a lot of the rules that have been placed upon South Central are things that are superimposed from an exterior force. So South Central is going to be South Central, but every day I can see, and over the years, I've seen a push towards something different.
Yeah. And what new challenges do people in South Central face?
I think because of the times, and because of there's a seemingly a progression of how African Americans in general are doing in this country, the idea that there is no more excuses, or the idea that we're doing it to ourselves, in a sense, I think is a conversation that's gaining more popularity, and which is just, I think, much more detrimental to our community. Because when you look at, there's so many things, South Central being a lot of food deserts. If you look at the quality of food in that neighborhood, in our neighborhoods, if you look at the quality of healthcare, and the accessibility to certain resources is just lack thereof. And that's why you have this kind of jungle-like mentality, if you will. And that's not everyone, and that's not everywhere in South Central. I don't want to demonize the area, because it's not like that. But
so, at the end of all of this, what are you hoping the play will accomplish?
So in the play, we talk a lot about gang violence. In the play, we talk a lot about police violence. And so what I'm really wanting to achieve by putting on this play and being a part of this play is not just to have the conversation about these things, because the conversation's been happening, but it's time to have action. And the only time things will actually change is when people start doing things. And so I'm hoping that we can see that this play, written in 1994, about 1992, we're still dealing with such issues, in some aspects to a larger extent, in 2016.
Yeah.
So the conversation should kind of stop, and the action should start. And I want the play to show the humanness of everyone, and us talking about Keith Watson. We're all trying to have this conversation. We're just coming at the same issue from different angles. So let's just talk.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you for having me.
You can go see Twilight Los Angeles 1992 this Friday at 7 p.m. and Saturday at 2:30 p.m. at the Scene Doc Theater on campus. For a full schedule, go to dramaticarts.usc.edu.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out next week's episode on the American Dream.
Tell us your dreams for the future on Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag #TheCurrentSC.